All right, good morning, everyone. Officially, welcome to Monday. Monday, week. Is this week 7, or is this, or is this week 8? So weird. It always feels like we're just kind of like starting, and then the next thing you know, you're like week 8 and week 9, and you're getting toward the end of the course, and it seems to go faster for me every time. Anyway, I don't know about you. What was I going to say? Yes. So we'll do a quiz on Friday. Okay, I posted it in Microsoft Teams. I think some of you saw, which was good. But we'll do that on Friday, same as we normally do, okay? Yeah, I went to my professional development thing. Wasn't anyone gonna ask how it was?
Boring?
Nobody wanted to ask how
was it?
how was it?
Yeah.
It was not super entertaining because again, well, it's not really supposed to be entertainment, right? But I found that it was, a lot of these things are kind of very high level, so they're kind of theoretical, but for many teachers like me, the question is, how do you take the theory and apply it in the classroom, right? Like, what do you actually do? Like let's say we all know that there's a law of gravity, right? We know that gravity works, but how do you sort of design a class that runs experiments with gravity, for instance, right? So you kind of know the thing that's up here, you know the theory, but it's like, how do you kind of put it into practice in a classroom? And that's the thing that always seems to be missing. One of the things they did point out that I did already know is that often students don't like to get things wrong and don't like to fail because they often have a mistaken they have mistaken ideas about intelligence, right? So the idea is that if you're smart, then you don't really have to struggle with things because you just are able to do things like that, right? And so sometimes students worry that if they struggle with something, that means that they're not smart, right? If you have to kind of work and struggle and you don't get it and you're like, why can't I figure this out? That means that you're not smart. And so some students, particularly students who actually are smart, will avoid struggling or will avoid doing anything that involves struggle because they think if they struggle, that means that they're not smart, they're not intelligent. So they'll avoid any struggles to kind of confirm their view of themselves. But that's not true. Smart people have to struggle through learning things too. And that, good morning. And that struggle is really the process of what learning is, right? If you're not kind of struggling with something, you're not really learning it, right? So anyway, that kind of came up, but I kind of knew that already anyway. So I don't know. There wasn't much there, I guess, for me. But maybe some others found it helpful. I don't know. But anyway, let's jump in. We're almost all here. I'm going to say good morning to Crazio here. So good morning, Crazio. Zartaj, good morning, Zartaj. Kayla, good morning, and Jesse. Good morning, Jesse. All right. So, gosh, where were we? 3 days ago? Seems like a week, right? Okay. So 3 days ago. Oh yes. Oh yes. We were talking about Ariana Grande, right? And so we analyzed her song Seven Rings, right? We looked at the lyrics in the song. Then we looked at the video for the song, right? The sort of visual representation. And we talked about how kind of the social messages of the song were sort of in alignment with the video and then ways in which they might conflict, right? And do you remember kind of some of those messages that we identified in either the lyrics or in the video? What did we identify? So in the song, she identifies that she doesn't need attention or anything from men,
Yeah.
right? But in the video,
She wanted that.
yeah, could we say that there were elements of the video that were definitely directed at men or were there for men? Yeah, that's very true, right? And so yeah, we heard that was kind of I think the main point, right? We heard some other messages about, sort of empowerment and money and the ability to just buy whatever you want and maybe sort of showing off a little bit, right? Maybe flexing a little bit because you've got all this money. But there was that kind of conflict, right? And again, I kind of got the idea that you guys maybe didn't believe the argument I was making, or maybe you did. I'm not sure. But I did suggest that, there's a lot of sexiness in pop music nowadays, right? And Ariana Grande uses a little bit of that sex appeal. She's not sort of the most blatantly sexual pop star out there for sure. But, I asked you let me just see. Back up here. But I asked you, the difference, how can we tell the difference between sexual empowerment and sexual exploitation, right? Because some people might say that, a video like that or a video with other pop stars, well, that's sexual empowerment, right? She's owning her sexuality, she's expressing it, the way she wants to in public, and that is empowering, right? That gives her power, or she's using her power. It's a powerful thing, right? Some people would make that argument. Other people would say, no, it's sexual exploitation, right? She's, other people are kind of using her to make money, right? Or her sexuality is simply being used to sell records, right? And that's exploitation. And so how do we know the difference between the two? How do we know what's sexual empowerment and sexual exploitation? How do we know the difference? Because it's tricky. Yes, how do we know the difference between someone who is empowered by their sexuality and someone whose sexuality is being exploited?
What does it mean? Like
Exploited means that it is being used for a purpose. Often it means it's being used to make money, but
So what, both are saying like that one's like just for purpose of power, and then this one is for another purpose. So it's just the same. So what do you mean by the
say that one more time.
because the one that you says like sexism for the power,
Yeah.
is like showing something in order to attract somebody or something, and to actually engage power. So and then the other one is just again for a purpose. Both of them are for a purpose. The difference might be the purpose, but both have like the same concept.
Well, both have to do with how sexuality is used, right? They both have to do with that. Why might someone express themselves in a sexual way, just in general? Why might somebody do that? Not like in a super sexy way, but even just a little bit.
Maybe because they want, like, they, yeah.
It definitely is a full purpose. So either the attention or attraction, whatever it is.
Attraction, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So Eunice said because they want to stand out. Attraction, like to attract other people?
Yeah.
Okay.
For their benefit.
To what?
For their benefit.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
something that they can
Oh, okay. Well, what benefit would they get?
to achieve something.
So if you, like you said, when like at the beginning, you're like, if you make videos like sexual videos, you'll get more publicity, and then that way you'll get more money, maybe.
Right. So people can use their sexuality to, well, I guess to gain more attention, right? Just in general. And so that attention might be just good for their ego, right? They might like a bunch of people kind of looking at them and checking them out. That might make them feel good. It might help them sell a product, right? Whether that product is, what maybe you're just a salesperson, right? But you use your sexuality to help you sell things, right? And Ariana is kind of, I think maybe not that different in that regard. She's using her sexuality to sell, maybe. So someone might express their sexuality because maybe they want attention, maybe they're using it for a purpose, maybe they're trying to attract someone, right? A particular someone, or just maybe seeing who's out there. Why else might somebody express their sexuality? This is a bit of a tricky one, but it's okay. And when I say that, all I'm saying is, expressing someone expressing themselves as a sexual being, right? So you don't have to be super sexy, right? You don't have to parade around in, no clothes or anything like that. But you just express yourself as a sexual being, as a sexual person. So might you be just expressing who you are? Yeah, right? That's a part of, your sexuality is a part of who you are, right? And so, the degree to which you sort of present that to society is another thing, but it's a part of you. It's a part of all of us, right? And there's parts of it that are private, and there's parts of it that are a little more public, right? If I walk down the street with my partner and I give her a little kiss on the cheek, in some ways I'm expressing my sexuality, right? Just a little bit, right? Not very much, but just a little bit. And so, yeah, the degree to which we do that can kind of vary, right? And so I'll circle back. So if a person can express their sexuality for all of those different reasons, how do we know what's empowering, what gives, in this case, a woman power? And how do we know when it's exploitation, when it takes that power away? How do we know the difference?
Like randomly.
Randomly?
No, I mean like.
No? It's not an easy question. It's definitely not an easy question. What do you think about, let's focus on Ariana here. Is her video that we just watched, is it sexual exploitation or is it sexual empowerment? Are we, yeah, what, is this an empowering video for her, or is somehow her power taken away? Both? Okay. Why do you say both?
It seems like she likes doing that, and then at the same time, she wants to get attention too. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because on the one hand, she looks like she's enjoying herself, right? She looks like she's confident and outgoing and she's doing what she wants. On the other hand, I think we all kind of instinctively get that she's making money off this, and the sex sells, right? They say that sex sells, and so sexiness helps draw eyes and it helps sell music, right? So we kind of know that that's happening, but she also seems to be expressing herself in a confident fashion, right? Although, and not to disagree with you, Dunya, because I do agree with you, but I will kind of throw in the idea that keep in mind that Ariana is a performer, right? So her job is to present whatever emotions are required during the performance, right? If she's singing a sad song, she has to be sad, right? She has to sing it in a sad way. If she's singing a fun, happy song, she's got to bounce around and be happy, Does she even have any of those? Never mind. But you get what I'm saying, right? She's a performer. She's, part of her job is to express different emotions when they're required, right? To perform in certain ways. So this could all be a performance.
I don't think so, because the lyrics are different than what she's doing.
The lyrics are different than what she's doing?
Yeah.
So the lyrics are.
If she's happy, that's okay, but it doesn't match the way that she's.
If she's happy, then that's okay. But yeah, it's not. Doesn't really match the lyrics entirely, right? There's no sexiness in the lyrics, and yet there it is in the video. So could she say no, do you think? Could she say, I don't want to do the sexy thing? I'm going to just. Can, yeah. But then what did we say? How's her career going to go?
I don't think it affects her career.
It's her choice, right? But if she is drawing eyes and selling records based on her sex appeal, if her sex appeal drops a little bit, is she going to sell less records? Is she going to sell less music? Maybe not, right? Because Ariana's she's an established name by this time. She's been very successful. We all know who she is for the most part. She might be okay, but there's some pop stars that maybe wouldn't, right? They're not as established, and so if they did turn down the sexiness, their career might be it, right? So this is kind of what I'm asking you to think about here it's very similar to the idea of consent, right? So can Ariana Grande and other pop stars, can they say no to this level of sexuality, right? Can they say, I'm comfortable expressing this kind of sexuality or this amount, but I'm not comfortable with this, right? Are they kind of able to do that? And are they able to say no to that sexuality without kind of negative consequences? Right? And again, I think depending on who you are, which artist you are, there might be some negative consequences, right? Again, Ariana's been very successful. She probably has a lot of power in the music industry. Her record company probably wants to keep her happy and keep her writing and performing music because they're making lots of money off it. And they might go along with, if she wants to go a different way. But less established stars, they might not get that same support, right? The record company might say, well, if you're not going to do the sexy thing, nobody's going to listen to you, so we're dropping you, right? And again, that's not being able to say no and have no negative consequences, right? And so, again, I think that's where we get into exploitation, where women feel they cannot say no to this type of behavior. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with what Ariana's doing here. I'm just asking about the context and the ability to say no to this. If she wants to express herself this way, awesome, right? That's okay. But it's not okay if she feels she has to, right? If she feels that if I don't get up there in my really skimpy dress and crawl around on that kitchen island, if I don't do that, my record company's not going to be happy, my fans aren't going to pay as much attention, if the record company's going to lose money, I'm going to lose money, I'm not going to be able to tour, right? And again, is this the kind of thing that The Weeknd is thinking about? Probably not, right? The Weeknd's not thinking, am I sexy enough? And in fact, during his last little artistic thing, wasn't he doing a thing where he was all bandaged up? And then he was like pretending he had plastic surgery, but then he really didn't?
I don't watch The Weeknd.
Oh, okay. I think he was doing this whole thing, and he was like, it almost seemed like he was, he had a bunch of plastic surgery. He really didn't. But again, he's doing this artistic thing by pretending he did this, and he's not worried about sexiness, right? He's making an artistic statement. Nobody worries about how sexy he is. But does Ariana worry how sexy she is? Do you think? kind of think she does. I kind of think she does. Do you think she pays a lot of attention to her appearance and her weight and her diet and everything?
Of course.
Yeah, right. I think she does, and I think you can tell just by looking at her that she does, right? All of her fashion, her dresses, her jewelry, her makeup, her hair, the nails, everything, right? You can tell she's paid a lot of attention to her appearance. The weekend, maybe not so much, right? And so what I'm trying to point out here is, well, I'm trying to point out, I guess, a few things. Number one, how important appearance is in society for women as compared to men, right? I'm trying to point out, when someone expresses themselves as a sexual being, they have to be able to do it kind of consequence-free. They have to be able to do it because they want to, right? And if they don't really want to, but they feel they have to, that's exploitive, right? They're either their record company is exploiting them, or maybe to some degree they're kind of exploiting themselves, right? They're kind of going against how they feel and who they are in order to simply sell records, right? Or sell whatever it is. And again, it ties into that idea of consent, right? That sexual activity needs consent, and it's not just yes, it's the ability to say no and nothing bad happens, right? That's real consent. Being able to say no and it's okay, right? If you say no and it's not okay, it's not real, it's not real consent, right? You're being kind of pushed into something and you shouldn't be, right? So one of the things I'll point out here as we transition out of this is that, again, a lot of the stuff, not a lot, but some of the stuff that we see in music videos today is actually kind of coming from the world of porn, right? So there's kind of pole dancing, and there's lots of nudity, there's lots of crawling around, lots of rap guys like to do their videos in strip clubs, and so a lot of this is kind of from the porn world, right? And the porn world is kind of seeping into the world of pop music. And again, I think that's a bit of an issue, right? Because who's pop music marketed at? Who's the audience? What's that?
Young adult.
Yeah, right? Teenagers, right? Young people for the most part, right? I know who Doja Cat is, but I'm sure that most people my age may not, right? So it's marketed at young people, right? And so you're sort of transmitting messages to young people about sexuality, and some of those are informed by the world of porn, right? Which is probably not a great thing, right? I used to actually bring up porn in this class and talk about it, but I pretty much got the feeling that most people were uncomfortable with it and didn't really want to talk about porn, and so I stopped doing it. But it's worth talking about, but maybe I won't do it right now. But it's because it's an area that nobody likes to talk about. It's also an area where none of the social messages get critiqued, right? So here we watched The Big Bang Theory, for instance, right? Or we watched the little video on it, and we kind of critiqued Big Bang Theory, right? We said, hey, this is some of the things that Big Bang Theory is not really doing a good job with, right? We saw that video essay on Harrison Ford movies, and we said, look, in these kind of, action movies, often men don't treat women very well, and nobody's kind of critiquing that, and so we should pay attention to that. But most people don't admit to watching porn, right? And so even though, if you look at the sort of number of website hits, if you look at the top 10, you'll see Facebook and Google and stuff like that. But in the top 10, you will see at least one porn site and maybe two, right? So lots of people are watching it. Nobody's saying that they're watching it, but lots of people are watching it, right? And so, but because nobody talks about it, there's a lot of really sexist, racist, problematic messages that are transmitted by porn. A lot of people are watching it, but nobody's talking about it, right? Nobody's critiquing the ideas that come up in porn. And so porn is kind of able to do whatever it wants because it operates in the darkness, right? Nobody will say, hey, I was watching this porn yesterday and it was really sexist, and here's why, right? No one in their right mind is going to say that, right? And so, again, pornography is able to just kind of do what it wants, right, for better or worse. And, again, I'm not necessarily saying that, porn is bad or all porn is bad, but, there are a lot of problematic messages, and people don't talk about them because people don't like to talk about watching porn, right? You're not supposed to. And if you do, you're not supposed to tell other people that you do, right? But it's true. That's kind of that's how we've been socialized, right? There are some things you do talk about and there's some things you don't, right? And so, again, we have an area of media that nobody's talking about that's able to transmit a lot of really negative messages, particularly about women. And nobody's saying anything because if you stand up and say something, that means that you're watching it, right? And, people watching it are like, oh, really? Watching porn? People get all weirded out, right? So, again, we won't go into the porn stuff too much. There's a lot to say about it, but I think basically what we need to know is that there are a lot of harmful messages about sexuality and relationships and women in porn, and it's problematic, right? Especially because, again, lots of people are watching it, right? And everyone can deny it, but the website hits don't lie, right? somebody's watching that stuff, and millions of somebodies are watching that stuff, right? And again, if we can't talk about it, then we can't critique it, right? And we can't sort of identify negative messaging in it. And so I'll spare you talking about it in here, because I'm sure that would be mortifying, but it's worth mentioning. Yeah, so let's see. So we've got pop music videos here. This is I'm just going through these slides. This is what we already talked about, right? Is the idea that exploitation and empowerment has to do with consent. If you're doing what you want because you want to do it and you want to express yourself that way, then that's an empowering thing, right? If you're being forced to do it or made to do it, or you feel like you have to do it, or nobody will pay attention to you or listen, it's kind of exploitive, right? You're using that sexuality for something else, right? To make money or for whatever reason, right? And so for someone like Ariana, it's difficult to know, right? Maybe only she knows, right? Maybe only she knows whether this is truly what she wants or maybe not, right? So I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think about that. But yeah, let's continue. So I've said that, so I'm just going to jump. Now, what I want to talk about today is a little more about human sexuality and control of that sexuality, okay? Because in every society, in every culture we go to, sexual behavior is controlled to some degree, right? You can't just do anything you want with anyone you want, wherever you want, right? There are rules, right? And some cultures have a lot of rules and they're very restrictive. Some cultures are a little more flexible and loose with sexuality and sexual behavior. But regardless, any culture you go to is going to have rules about sexuality and sexual behavior, okay? And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is that kind of idea. And particularly I want to talk about the differences in how men's sexual behavior and women's sexual behavior is kind of seen and controlled, okay? So let me just see what my next slide here is. It's that one, and then, okay. So how are, what's my question for you? How are men expected to behave sexually in society, right? So in terms of their kind of like romantic interactions with women, again, I'm leaving out gay and lesbian and bisexual people here for the moment, just to keep things simple. How are men kind of expected to express themselves? How are they supposed to be with women? What is society, what kind of societal messages about how men should be? Say again?
Where specifically?
Where?
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm kind of coming at this from a Western perspective, right? So, again, I know we've got, we have different cultures and different countries of origin in here. So, what do you think the West is telling men about how they should be?
Respectful.
They should be what?
Respectful.
Respectful? Okay. Okay. Harrison Ford's characters would disagree with you, but that's okay. So respectful. Okay. What else?
Treat and like protect the women.
Okay. So men are supposed to be kind of protective, right? What else are they supposed to be? Don't use women just don't objectify them, don't use them, right? James Bond would disagree with you, but that's okay. What else? Don't give the up and down look. Don't visibly check women out. Okay, what else? See, This is interesting because I feel like there's kind of a difference, or I like what you guys are saying here. So, like Zartaj says, to be responsible, to not be creepy with women. And it's true, right? And so, but I feel like there's kind of two versions of what's going on here. So you're kind of bringing the version of sexuality that is, what you're supposed to do, right? If you're a good person, you do this, right? But often I think in movies we see a different version of masculinity played out, right? And so there's, things that our moms and dads tell us, right? And that this is how you should be, this is how a respectful, proper person behaves. But often in the media, I feel like we see something different. Right? I feel like we see a different kind of masculinity, a different kind of sexual behavior from men. And so, what do we see from the media? What kind of man do they present to us very often? Same thing? Okay. What do you think, guys? Yeah, what kind of man do we see in terms of his interactions and behavior with women? What do we kind of see in a lot of media and a lot of movies? Kind of a stereotypical man from movies. Sorry? Assertive?
Yeah.
In what way?
Anyway.
Anyway?
Yeah. You'll see him in the
Like when he drives? Like what do you mean?
In acting.
Okay.
Before.
So give me an example of an action that an assertive man would take.
So the movie was Harrison actually playing just shoots doors and then try to kiss the lady.
Yeah, so in those he was kind of the pursuer, right? He was the one who was kind of chasing the woman, right? Is that true? Are men kind of encouraged to be the ones?
Get close to the girl.
Yeah, they're the ones who are supposed to.
Make the
make the first move, right? To chase, to initiate things, right? Men are supposed to do that. Women, for the most part, well, not so much, right? So they're supposed to. We usually don't see women asking out men, although it's okay to do so, right? But usually we see the man asking out a woman, right? So men are supposed to be assertive, they're supposed to chase, they're supposed to make the first move. Women, a little bit less so, right? What else do we see?
They're strong and they can fight, like, because women are seen as, like, in the movies, it's like they're weak, can't fight. So in the movies, men are usually like so strong and like.
Yeah, men are expected to be strong, like physically strong and tough, whereas women are often, sometimes they're portrayed as tough, but not as tough as the men, right? Depending on the character. Some women are tough, some women are not so much. Depends, right? What about a man who, in a movie, he has like a lot of different sexual partners, right? So he kind of goes from, like, think James Bond, right? James Bond goes from woman to woman. He probably sleeps with like 3 women in every movie at least, if he's having an off day, right? So he does this. Now, but what does society think of that? Cool or not cool? Cool. Yeah, right? So he's very successful with women, right? He kind of very quickly, charms them off their feet and into his bed, and then the next morning he's off to kill more bad guys, right? And that's cool, right? Because what do we kind of call that sort of guy? What do we call him? Shouldn't be, but it is. Yeah. But what does society kind of call that type of guy? We have kind of names for those types of guys. They're players. Yeah, players one. What's another one?
Definitely not a fool. I'm thinking of the other two.
There's another word that involves the F word that I won't say in here. You're all thinking.
F-boy.
Yeah, F boy, right?
I nearly said the F.
Yeah. Don't say the F word, but that's okay. Playboy, Zartaj says. Yeah, Harry says, correct. Anything else? Players. F-boy is kind of a new one. Yeah, Playboy. What else? Stud. That's kind of an older one, but sometimes we still use that. What else? Player. Casanova. But that's going like 100 years. That's like 100 years old. Casanova. Yeah, it's a guy who's successful with men. It's like a character from 100 years ago. Nobody uses that anymore. Okay, fine. So this is and all of these are kind of, with the exception of F-boy, these are all kind of good things to be, right? Player, right? That's a good thing, right? Guys are high-fiving each other when they behave like that. But is it the same for women?
No.
No?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. What do women get called? When they have lots of sexual partners?
Or slut and hoe and.
Yeah.
And
Right. Slut and whore and all these kind of like really ugly words, right? Which is interesting because it's the same behavior, is it not? Same behavior, right? Having multiple sexual partners, right? Even if you're honest and you don't cheat on anyone and don't hurt anyone, still guys are getting high fives for this sort of behavior, right? Women are getting called nasty things. Now, that's a bit of a double standard, is it not? Why is that? Why is it okay for James Bond to do that sort of thing and not for, let's say, Lara Croft Tomb Raider to do that kind of thing? Oh man.
I've heard of the movie.
Trying to think of a female action hero. Current. Anyway, why is it different? Why is it different?
Because women are like pictured in a different way.
Pictured in a different way?
Like in society, like they're not supposed to be act that way, and like men are like supposed to act that way.
Exactly. But why? Arad, what were you gonna say?
It is being shown. I mean, like, it is sick to be with lots of different guys, and I don't know, like in once times, like, for example, especially if you're in a relation and then you're with lots of different persons. So this is sick. This is toxic. If you're that person, you're definitely not mental. You're definitely not in a good mental health level. You should go to the doctor.
If you're in a relationship or if you're not?
No, if you're in a relationship,
Oh, sure.
Lots of different persons.
Yeah,
So
well,
this is sick.
well, we're not. Yeah, well, and we're not talking about people who are in a relationship here, because yeah, if you're cheating on your partner, that's another thing, right?
No, I mean, like, nobody's right to do this action.
Uh-huh.
But if he's sick or she's sick, yeah. But this is the way that is shown in the movie, and it is not right.
Okay.
So you get what I mean? It's like this is not true. This is not good.
It's
This is totally sick, but it is shown in the movie.
It is shown in the movies for sure, right? So we do see lots of people in movies who sleep with multiple people over the course of the movie, right? And so again, cheating is another thing, right? That's a bad thing, right? You're hurting someone that you're in a relationship with. That's totally separate. But yeah, we do see that in movies quite often, and and in real life as well, right? There's lots of people who kind of go from person to person, and that's kind of what they do.
This is not normal.
Well, that's a good question, but I'm going to leave that open. So you think that's not normal, which is okay. Now, but the question is, why is there a difference? Why does society congratulate men, for the most part, either in society or in movies, for this behavior, and why does it condemn women for that behavior?
Because all of this relates to inequality.
Well, it's an inequality for sure.
So what about like the society, how they pushing maybe because they think it's okay for the man to be like that, but
Yeah. Yes, but the question I'm asking is, why does society think that? Yeah, I know they do, but why? It's a double standard, right? It's a double standard. We have one set of behaviors for men and one set of behaviors for women, right? Okay. So let me just see where we are.
It's a pretty hard question.
It is. And so, but I'm going to help you with it very shortly. So this is kind of what I'm saying. And again, I know there's cultural differences here. I know there are personal differences here, right? We all have different ideas about, well, we've all been socialized differently, right? Not one of us is from the same country in this room, right? Not one of us. And so, yeah, not one of us. And so we've all been socialized differently, right? We've all been brought up in different cultures, different religions, different sets of parents, right? Even parents within a single culture will raise their children differently, right? The people next door to you are not raising their children the exact same way that you were raised, right? And so there's always going to be differences, but there's also some societal patterns, right? And again, movies and television is good for that because they often show us those patterns, right? They show us those stereotypes. And so one of the things that we see is, yeah, men are often promiscuous, right? So they have multiple sexual partners, sometimes at the same time, sometimes one after the other. But usually the movie frames that as a positive thing, right? James Bond sleeps with 3 or 4 women in every movie, and The movie doesn't frame it as, oh, what a horrible guy he is. Usually they frame it as he's a cool dude, right? He stylishly sweeps these women off their feet into his bed, and the next morning he's off driving his cool car with his sunglasses off to kill some assassin or whatever he's doing, right? He's cool. He's the epitome of cool. But again, women who are engaged in this same behavior, they're often called a lot of negative names, right? Women are not supposed to be promiscuous, right? That's not how they're supposed to behave, and yet men are encouraged to do so. And again, whether anyone actually does is another question, but this is kind of the pattern. And what I'm asking you is, of course, why? And it's a difficult question. I know it's a difficult question. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you something that will suggest something maybe interesting to us, but also might give us a bit of an answer to, or lead us to an answer to why we have this double standard in the first place. Okay? So, take a break, come back, and when we come back, we'll kind of untangle this issue a little bit more. Okay? Okay. Okay, and we're back. Yes, we're back. Good. So what I'm pointing out here is, again, regardless of kind of what your personal beliefs might be, for a long time, Western society has pushed this type of dichotomy, right? The sort of man as the aggressor, the sexual being, the pursuer, the one who is expected to have many sexual relationships or conquests. And in media they tend to get congratulated for it. It tends to be seen as a good thing. And again, maybe that's starting to change because the label of F-boy is probably the first one that's been used where it's actually not a good thing. You know what I mean? Like being a player, being a stud, those are all cool things, right? And society's giving men high fives for that. But to be an F-boy, that's not really a good thing, is it? Is it?
Definitely not.
Okay. It's not cool. No, it's not a cool thing to. It's not a cool thing to be, right? So it's kind of the first label that men are getting for this behavior that is actually not cool. But what I want to do here is I want to show you this, right? So, well, I'll show you this in a second. The idea here is that in many societies around the world, and I would even argue in most societies around the world, actually I might even argue almost all societies around the world, men's sexual behavior is not as tightly controlled as women's sexual behavior, okay? And again, there's different standards in different cultures. Again, some cultures are, sexual behavior is very tightly controlled, and in some cultures it's much more loose. But I think in almost any culture you would go to, you would find that men have more sexual freedom, more kind of elbow room to do what they want. Women, much less so. Okay? And so, yeah, we have, as Harry pointed out here, we have a double standard. But why? So, to address this question, I'm going to jump here. I want to watch this TED Talk by a psychologist named Christopher Ryan. So Christopher and his wife Casilda, they wrote a book called Sex at Dawn, okay? And what Christopher and his wife Casilda tried to do was to look at human sexual behavior from kind of an evolutionary perspective, okay? So evolution kind of tells us that organisms develop things that are useful to them, right? Whether it's wings or scales or fur or, hands with, 10 fingers or a big brain or the ability to walk on 2 feet. Evolution tells us that we evolved all those things because they were useful to us, right? They gave us some benefit. Wings give birds some benefit, right? Scales give fish some benefit. So here, Christopher Ryan is saying, well, what's human sexuality? What is the benefit of it? Why do we have it? Okay? Because he's going to point out, and I won't spoil too much here, I'm just going to try and set it up for you. Human sexual behavior is complicated, right? And it's a big deal, right? If you've ever watched a nature special, maybe on Netflix, you'll see animals usually have sex in the wild, and it's not much happens, right? They kind of wander around close to each other, and then it's like, boom, 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 and they're done, right? And they go separate ways. Nobody seems to be, too put out by the experience, right? It doesn't seem to be anything, and they just kind of wander off, right? But for humans, it's not like that at all, right? It's a whole thing with humans, right? And so he's kind of asking the question, yeah, why? Why are we different, right? Why is sexual behavior such a big deal for us? And why did we evolve it? What kind of animals are we? And how does our sexuality benefit us? Okay? So, we will watch this and I'll ask you 3 questions. Now, the first one is a tough one, especially in a talk, right? Because we can't read over it. But we'll do our best to figure out what his argument is, okay? He'll also say something here. He'll say that men believe they have some right to monitor and control women's sexuality, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And he'll also say something else, which I don't really expect you to be able to answer, but I'm curious to hear what you might say, that women's sexuality becomes conflated with property rights, okay? What does conflated mean again? No? Haven't I used that word in here? Haven't I told you it's a fancy word? If you use it, you'll sound smart. Conflated. Okay. Conflated is like combined or mixed up or thought of as the same. When you conflate something, you kind of take two things and you make them as if they're one thing. Okay? Conflated. All right. So, online people, you'll see this in Microsoft Teams. The link and the questions are there. So I'll let you watch it. We'll watch it here, of course, in class, and we'll see you in a few minutes to talk about what we've seen. Okay? So good luck with that. We'll see you very shortly. All right. So before I ask you these questions, would you like to ask me any questions about what you heard? Was there some confusion about what he was saying, about some of the terms he was using? Did it make sense? Did it make no sense whatsoever? It made sense. Nobody got any of his jokes, probably.
I understand.
Okay. All right. Can we talk about these questions then? Okay. So what is his argument? What is the argument that he and his wife Casilda are making in this book? Harry says that TED Talk was pretty wild. Indeed it was, right? There were chimps and bonobos and talk about testicles and all kinds of things, right? It's crazy, crazy stuff. But what's he arguing, Christopher? How about we back it up? Throw me some ideas that you heard, some things that he said.
The last phrase.
What was the last phrase?
Men and women
Oh yeah, the Mars and Venus thing?
no, the men and women are from Africa.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of a joke that you may not get.
I know that one.
The Mars and Venus thing?
No, the from Africa because in the Bible.
Oh yeah. Well, what he's kind of saying is there used to be a book, because in many societies, we try to understand the relationship between men and women. And this doctor, I think his name was Dr. John Gray, he wrote a book called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And it was very popular. Lots of people read it. And it talked about the differences between men and women and why men are this way and why women are this way. To be honest, I've never really read it. I don't know that it's I don't know that, it's factual or true, but it was very popular. And so that's what Christopher is saying here. He's like, it's not that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Men are from Africa and women are from Africa, right? We're not different things. We're very similar things, right? We're both from the same place. So that's kind of what he's talking about. He's referring to that book, I think from the 1990s, maybe. Hundreds of years ago, clearly. What else did you hear? What else did he say? Some ideas that he had.
It's a bit awkward.
It's a bit awkward? That's okay.
Because of the thing, I'll just say something else. That the women from southern China, they
Yeah.
have like hundreds of partners, and the women from the other place,
From the Amazon?
yeah, they did that when like the man like fits what they want their child to be. So
Yeah.
when the child's born, the man like acknowledge that that's their child.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting, right? Because he's talking about, Charles Darwin, who came up with evolution as an idea. He kind of thought that humans were pair bonders, right? So in the animal world, you have a few things, right? So sometimes you have animals that just kind of get together, they have sex, and then they never see each other again, right? That's how they reproduce. Some animals are pair bonders, right? So a male and a female will bond together, and then they'll stay together sometimes for life, right? Penguins are like that. Maybe penguins are cute. Canada geese are like that. If you see the geese that are flying around here honking, they're pair bonders. Who else is a pair bonder? Well, lots of animals are, right? And Darwin thought that that's what we were. But Christopher Ryan is saying, I'm not so sure that's true, because he said lots of cultures have practices that contradict that idea, right? So the Mosuo in southwestern China, it's not just women, but people are sexually autonomous, right? Because again, you raise your children with your brothers and sisters, right? In your mother's house. That's the way they kind of divide up their families there. So who the actual biological father of the child is really not that important, because the child is going to be raised with his mother, and the child's role model, well, male role model, is going to be her brother, right? Because they're living in the same house. So people are kind of sexually autonomous. I don't know that they have hundreds of partners. I think he was exaggerating, but the number of partners you have is just not anyone's business but your own in that society, right? And then we saw some tribes in the Amazon that, again, they feel that multiple men can actually be the father of a child, right? And we know, of course, it doesn't work that way, but for their purposes, it doesn't really matter, right? Because, again, they feel that you can have kind of team paternity. You can have multiple men that are the father of one child. And again, we know it doesn't work that way, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because humans socially construct their reality, and things that humans believe to be true can have power as if they were, right? As if they were. So that's important. What else did he say?
What's like the humans are similar to the what's that chimpanzee ape
Chimps and bonobos.
bonobos, yeah.
Yeah. So chimpanzees, you've probably seen chimpanzees before. Yeah, but bonobos look very, very similar. I'm not sure I can tell them apart. So chimps and bonobos are kind of similar to us, right? Genetically speaking, we're about 98% the same as them, right? So we're very close. That 2% clearly makes a big difference, but still, we're very, very similar. They're cute, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're kind of similar to chimps and bonobos in a couple ways, right? And one of the ways that we're similar to them is that females of those species are available for sex almost all the way through their menstrual cycle, right? Chimpanzees, it's about 70%. Bonobos, it's about 90%. Human women can have sex all the way through their menstrual cycle, right? They may not want to, right? They may not really feel like they're interested at some times, but they can, right? Unlike other animals that only have certain times of the year, right? When they're in heat, right? Sometimes you'll hear, when you're talking about animals, you'll hear about female animals being in heat. That's when they're kind of ready to engage in sexual activity. But human females can be ready kind of all the time, right? And again, Christopher Ryan says that's kind of strange, right? There's really no animals that are like that, right? Most animals have periods in which they breed and reproduce, and then other parts of the year where they just don't have sex, they're not interested in it, it doesn't happen, right? But humans are different, right? Yeah, he said our beliefs are from the Victorian ages about human sexuality. Yeah, so that's that kind of pair bonding idea. Right at the beginning of the talk, he started talking about this kind of traditional narrative about the relationship between men and women. What did he say? How did this kind of relationship of between men and women work? We kind of gave each other something, right? Men provided one thing, women provided another. What was it?
The men provided like the meat, shelter, protection, and stuff.
Yeah.
And women, like, what's it? Infidelity, I think?
Well, not infidelity, but fidelity.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so this kind of standard narrative where man was the hunter, right? Men brought home the meat, men provided shelter and protection, right? And, you know, fought off the wild animals, right? And women promised, you know, not to have sex with any other guys, just that one guy, right? That's kind of the exchange, right? That's the sort of oppositional exchange relationship that people have talked about for hundreds of years, right? But then what does he say about that kind of idea? Does he agree with it? Does he say that, oh, that's exactly the way it is? TED Talk over? Ryan out? Boom. No. What's he say? Do you remember?
I
Kind of forgot? Okay. He says that that's the traditional narrative, but if you look at hunter-gatherer groups, if you look at foraging groups, you won't see that type of relationship. You'll see people sharing everything, right? Everybody shares everything. That's how hunter-gatherers manage to survive, right? Men go out hunting, women go out gathering, everybody comes back, everybody shares and eats together, right? There's no yours and mine, there's just ours, right? And so he says that's the best way to mitigate risk in a foraging context, so to make sure that everybody gets to eat. But he also says that it kind of destroys that traditional relationship, right? Because women don't need men to get meat and shelter and protection because they get it from the group. Everybody shares everything. So they don't really need a man for that. And so that kind of idea of, man providing this and women providing their sexual fidelity doesn't really work. Doesn't make sense, right? Based on what we know about hunter-gatherers. So where does this idea come from? And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow because we're all out of time. So, also, we are all apes. I'm sorry. You're an ape. I'm an ape. We're all apes. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. So you can pack it up, come back tomorrow. We will finish talking about Christopher Ryan, and then I have something else for you to do, sexism-wise. Yes. What?
No, I said okay.
Okay. Sorry, Dunya, did you say something?
No.
You're okay? Okay. That is all, people. So you can pack it up, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Although I don't believe that we are